Yeah, the forums about the theory of the work. I think I need to establish that a little more carefully. And memory links and purpose, the connection between them, which is today's topic, are basic parts of that theory. I think we perhaps need to use the theory a bit more than we do. David used the word philosophy. I use the word tools. I think we need to bring the word theory back a bit more, just in terms of identifying what the forums are, because they are theoretical explorations of the work. They're not therapy sessions. And as I have recently, you probably noticed, taken out the, I've forgotten the word I've taken out. Taken out, what did we call it before we called it ground rules? Credo, of course. Sorry. I took it out and then couldn't remember what I'd taken out. Yeah, I took out the word credo because I felt it had a sort of connotation, slightly, I don't know, I can't find the right word, but something like slightly exotic or sort of new age, which I didn't want. I feel there's always a plainness to our work, a straightforwardness. I feel we very much exist in the ordinary world. And that's why I took the word credo out. I felt it just had a tinge that I didn't quite want. So I'm obviously thinking this work through all the time. And the reason I put in, you know, where we are and what time it is, and we've got an habit of putting it, what the weather is, and then I say we're going from east to west, is to acknowledge that, you know, we're a long way away from each other. And I think we've got to be careful what we do with personal sharing within this terribly new media. What I've spoken about recently is the strength and robustness of the work. And going back to using my word, the strength and robustness of these tools. But putting in that word, theory, the theory of memory links is that we retain the emotional impact of incidents from our past in our heart, mind, and soul. We retain it consciously and unconsciously. We have inside us a sense, an emotional storage, emotional iCloud, okay? You know, emotional storage of all this stuff. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't actually asked. I wasn't actually asking to say something. I was just, you said something, emotional iCloud, I think, and I thought, yeah, and maybe I'll comment later. I was just saying yes, you know, I get that, so that I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry.
No, that's okay. And to stay with those words, you know, because I'm saying we store those incidents in our mind, heart, and soul, I also want to use those words that purpose brings into our lives a strength and a happiness to our minds, hearts, and souls. And the thing I want to get across in the forums, I want to get more across in the forums, is that the method of using these robust tools is to be, for one, seeing the practicality of them, because I think that's a way in. This is our work is always practical, and it's the phrase that David used, and Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 6 days till the 14th of May, which is going to be the 50th anniversary and going to be our launch of what I want to call the Year of David. The way he put it, and he would say, and I think it's important in terms of just staying with that word a bit, theory, because I guess I want to make a distinction between theory and practice, and the forums are not a therapy group, and we have to all sort of in some way adjust to that. And I'm still struggling with that. I've been accustomed to, because that's the 14th of May, 15th of June next year is the 50th anniversary of the Pelham Institute. And in all those years, and Mary and Nikki knows this, there's always been the phrase, the group room. It's as if it's one word, the group room. And even when it's in different locations, it's still the group room, and that means that we all meet together in the same room. And this is, we're literally on different sides of the world. So how we adjust that in the sort of forum being theory, and then what we have called the virtual Pelham Italy retreats are the therapy side. So, but going back to purpose, purpose brings strength into our life. Purpose is the force like almost no other that brings energy into our life. And no one is going to say human energy and having great access to human energy in human history has always been a good idea. Because within purpose, there is all our ability to survive and do well and outpace every other species that's been around. We beat them all, and we created what we've created. And that's about purpose. And all the, I guess you could say, glory of the humankind and the destructiveness of the humankind is in sustaining purpose. Sustaining purpose is Black Lives Matter. Sustaining purpose is also to keep it the opposition to Black Lives Matter. Sustaining purposes, always. You know, the nature of sustaining purpose you can just see in any, you know, all those, of course, marvelously photographed black and white records of Nazi Germany in the mid to late 30s, and they're so marvelously photographed because she was a, I can't remember her name, I can't pronounce her name, but you know, she was a genius film director. So the stuff has production qualities almost like no other documentaries, almost. But, you know, her feeling of sustaining purpose with Hitler convincing a nation that following him means their future will be theirs. The future will be ours. And we are superior to anybody else. So sustaining purposes, and in other people's lives, the power of a garden, the power of a study of literature, you know, the power of working with kids, the power for me of continuing this work. That's sustaining purpose. What I want to methodologically, you know, practically, the way this material works, and I guess in a way, the reason I want to get back to theory is making it familiar, okay? Sort of studying it, learning about it, then applying it all over the place, okay? And there's something about David's mind which I believe in some ways is unmatched in my field of work. He came up with things that you can just use. There's always a positive there. There's always a positive and there's always a safety. It's not like going in and having a diagnosis that you apply to someone because they're doing really badly, okay? And you couldn't sort of take that diagnosis and apply it all over the place. You know, I have learned about bipolar syndrome because I've got it or my brother's got it, and then I'll sort of apply it to a whole bunch of other people all over the place. You couldn't do it. I mean, it wouldn't be nice, it wouldn't be polite, it wouldn't be fair. And it wouldn't be fair to the people to whom I'm applying that diagnosis, or it wouldn't be fair to the people who developed it. They developed it to help with a particular human condition. They would say a particular mental illness. It wasn't something to sort of throw all around the place. It wasn't something to play with. And yet David material is different than that. It is something to throw all around the place. It is something to play with. Vic.
It's really, I just want to connect with everything you've just in the last minute been saying about the specialness of David's mind, and I can, you know, affirm that, not only from my own experience in the activating with David, but also seeing the work that you've done, Peter, and contemplating the last half century. It always gets me to say that. In a sense, the genius of David's mind is that, and you said it, and I just want to reaffirm what you said, which is that he developed something that was talkable. You could talk about this all over the place, and yet, like with other things, if you talk about it, you'll lose it. It will get dissected, watered down, and gone, and its power gets lost. It gets diluted as you go horizontal, right? But with David's philosophy, as you call it in theory, you can talk this and keep talking about it, and that's what we're doing. And yet it doesn't lose its what shall I say, primacy. I'm just picking up words here. Its primacy, its originality, and that's a really remarkable thing. That's a remarkable thing. I just want to capitalize on that, and thank you, Peter, for saying that. I affirm what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really think it's unusual. I think there are other parts of, the sort of human intellectual journey, if I could call it that, because, as you know, history is my hobby. And, go back to other times, and the history of the human mind, from developing the first language of Greek hieroglyphics to, I guess, the language of computers. If you just take that line, about sort of symbols of writing, quote unquote, because they talk about writing programs, don't they? They use the word writing. So, there is a line in human intellectual history of what writing has gone through and meant. And, I hesitate to use the word unique about David, just because I think it can be overused. I hesitate about using it defensively. Defensive of him, unique person, unsung heroes, undiscovered genius. It's, got a little bit of cliche to it, I think. And I prefer to talk about his originality. I think it's safer. All those other things, if I'm being absolutely honest with you, and I don't need this taken off, Cynthia, but all those things I just said.
You don't need it taken off, or you do?
That was a joke. I do not.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah. In my heart of hearts, I believe those things. Unique, unsung hero, undiscovered genius. But I've sort of learned over the years it's more effective to come in with the word originality, because doesn't you don't get into the same battles, but there is something about you, and particularly with these two, which we'll be talking about today, memory links and purpose. And going back to Vic's point, just touching on that. So it is true that you can play with these tools, you can use them lightly, you can think, what are Donald Trump's purpose in memory links? What are Joe Biden's purpose in memory links? And if you take it into Canada, what are Justin Trudeau's purpose in memory links? And, his father was a very particular person, Pierre Trudeau. That's his memory links. It came out today, I think it was published today in America. A Black woman, because today's Mother's Day, a Black woman has published a book on the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and I can't quite remember the third one, but three of them, their mothers, okay. Might have been Frederick Douglass. You know, looking at the mothers of three great civil rights leaders and how the mothers formed their, I can use the word safely here, with their political genius. And that's memory links. You know, we can look at that in terms of memory links. And the Black Lives Matter, you can look at it in terms of memory links. And you can look at it in terms of both memory links and purpose. And, you know, I think one of the ways that movements like Black Lives Matter end up having a power, is people tell their stories. You know, people tell their stories, and our story is our memory links. You know, my memory links are my story, and my story is unique, as we've touched on earlier here when we're looking at memory links. And I guess I really want to present just the robustness and strength of the tools, is in using them, applying them in a whole lot of different ways. And I say in training people to be, when I was training people to be psychotherapists and practitioners, counselors, I always said you got to apply the tools to yourself first, okay? But that is a particular, that is within the location of me training practitioners to be therapists. You know, in that location, you've got to apply the tools to yourself first. Because if you start seeing them as techniques that you learn, but they are outside of you, that's not our approach to the therapeutic process. So that's a particular location, applying the tools to yourself first. Cynthia.
Well, this is a little off there, but I just want to get this question out there because just because it came to my mind and I don't want it to get lost. Has there been any work using the tools for different types of professions other than therapy? Like, because I mean, I've already started. I mean, I know it's, well, actually, I'm not a New Age astrologer, so I'm I'm definitely, but that's different things. But I mean, I know I've been able to use them. You know, not even just matching. I mean, I just had a client consultation and I just said, are you getting any feelings of accomplishment? You know, and then we had a great discussion about that. I mean, using that in, I mean, I could also see tools being great for lawyers and for all sorts of professions. I could see these tools being very applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, a lot of people are using another direction. And there is not something impelling, and this is sort of outside of David, but influenced by David. There's not something impelling that says everyone should do therapy. There's not, because there was in the humanistic movement, this is an aside, and I guess within this context, you know, because partly because the group's small, I'm taking the opportunity to talk about, you know, how it works, because I want to get that to be a really tight, succinct package, okay? You know, apply it all over the place. Don't worry about applying it to yourself first. If and I knew this right at the beginning, okay? Right at the beginning, right at the very end, because yeah, this is personal. But when you said that is coming up, that's coming up to the anniversary of David's death. And I know when I opened Pelham, okay? So I was sort of shocked that it was such a short period of time. It was only a year between his death and me opening Pelham. In my head, it had always been 2 or 3 years. Okay, so I did that. And I knew right at the beginning, you know, if I was a million, and this is the way you said to myself, if I was a millionaire, I'd just be teaching the activated philosophy of human behavior, you know. And it was just general. It wasn't for therapists. In fact, David almost would not have liked that in a way. It was just general, okay? Philosophy of human behavior, it's useful for anybody. All sorts of different people came, but sort of by the nature of things, it attracted social workers and teachers and doctors and nurses. But in Pelham and my Pelham Italy program, people just came. They didn't necessarily come to be therapists. That's the whole thing about, it is now a school of thought and practice, humanistics, school of thought and practice, and the history of psychotherapy. It's a way people made a living. Okay? That's simple. Really that simple. And that's why you say to myself, okay, I've got to make these changes because, you know, and, you know, people wanted to study with me, wanted to study this material, and then wanted to make a living. So that's how it went that way. You could I think you could almost say that, it's a little stretch of my imagination, but say my background had been in law, okay? And maybe I would have set up something that was called for lawyers. Who knows? Rick.
Famous last words, just briefly, that's a joke because usually when I start talking, I rattle on too long. But just briefly, in connecting with what Cynthia said and Peter's response, it's interesting to me that bringing the word educator, David as an educator, and not so much as a therapist. And yet, as Peter said, you know, the therapy became a big deal. Of course, in that era of time, therapy became a very, very big deal too, right?
Yeah,
and so one could almost say that the wave, as it came along, influenced that. But maybe to get at what Cynthia was saying about applying Pelham and Pelham tools, etc., in all these other areas, is to think of David as an educator, which somewhere, did he characterize himself in that way, Peter, do you think, as an educator? Or he did, obviously he used the word philosopher. So I'll just leave it at that. The word educator comes to mind as being perhaps useful.
I think it's very useful. And that's the way I saw the National Film Board on the film, you know, which thank goodness we got. Because, you know, we've got the documentary evidence, an hour of it. I talked about him being an emotional teacher, and yeah, I told that, and that was unique. And he's taught in an emotional way. And the guy who made the film phoned me, and, you know, I was sort of stunned by the response, okay, me, you know, getting this film made. And he said, you know, I'm coming out to see you, and if you can substantiate what you put on paper, we will make the film. I mean, you know, yeah, that blew me away, to use that expression. And of course, you know, he met David, and yes, he taught. So it's, and I guess one of the things I want to do over these 2 years, you know, the anniversary of David and the anniversary of the Pelham Institute, is sort of establish some of these things really clearly, I guess. Like, it's not about psychotherapy. I have made it about psychotherapy. And that's why I came up with the term contribution training, because I guess I know what I wanted to say. In the humanistic movement, psychotherapy movement, there was a sort of pyramid. It was called a hierarchy of needs, and it comes from Maslow. And the top is authenticity. So the top, in a sense, is doing all your therapy, okay? Because that's the way you become authentic. Therefore, the world would be a better place. This is me being a critic. If everyone was be a therapist and do their therapy, and my point of view, if that happens, we starve, okay? We don't make it. And that's, of course, where, and you were the one who pointed out really early on, Mary, this is a school of therapy that has a place for money, the material life force. And it's not an adjunct, it's central, material life force, they're performance life force, material life force, caring life force, they're my words. And they're, it's not that one is more important than any other. Without a healthy material life force, which is unemotional, which are people who do not want to do their therapy, who do not want to go into their emotions, who want to find, the way I said in teaching, someone's got to get from point A to point B, and they're in the caring life force. Well, they want to go via, MNQ, okay? They don't want to go directly from A to B because they want to talk about it, okay? We've got this journey, we must talk about it. What feelings is this journey bringing up for me? There's got to be a circuitous journey. If someone's in the performing life force, they want to go through X, Y, and Z via, not directly, because they want it to be exciting and creative and politically meaningful. Someone in the material life force, if we want to get from point A to point B, find the direct route. It's not emotional, it's and it's a word, isn't it, in the material life force, the bottom line. Yes, anyway, that's the life forces. I mean, the bit I do not want to lose sight of here is the way that the purposes we find in life, whether they're superficial purpose, which is just having fun, being entertained, having a good time, hanging out, shopping, going to a party, going to a political meeting, going to a football match, going to an art gallery. I mean, I put in the political party and the art gallery because for some people that's superficial purpose. That's the light stuff. It's not central to their life. But for somebody else, running a store or running for office, or being an artist, they're ways people make their living. So that's underlying purpose, okay? And if you remember, in superficial purpose, but feelings of accomplishment are very strong, but they don't link up over time. There is Cynthia, there is diagrams of this. I must get to you and get your help distributing. So there is, so in superficial purpose, the feelings of accomplishment don't add up over time. In underlying purpose, they add up over time, that they can come to an end. Careers come to an end. People lose spouses. Divorce can happen. Death can happen. Then there's sustaining it. So the feelings of accomplishment in underlying purpose add up over time, like building blocks in our life. But they can be finite. They can be closed off. Kids leave home. And if parents try to hang on too much, the kids might emigrate to New Zealand. Not thinking they're trying to get away from their parents, but in fact getting away from their parents. Because the feelings of accomplishment about being a parent aren't the same when the children are adults as when they were babies. But simple. And sustaining purpose is interest in our life, often they're called passions in our life, that we can be involved in till the day we die. And there, the feelings of accomplishment link up over time, but don't necessarily come to an end. We have some control. So that's the power of purpose, those three levels of purpose coming in to our life because they provide feelings of accomplishment. Now, what we're looking at here is almost specifically, how do those feelings, what are the memory links behind those particular feelings of accomplishment? We could almost take any feeling of accomplishment and they go, what are the memory links behind that? Vic.
So that brings up what was on my mind a while ago when you said emotional iCloud. Something that's been on my mind for a while now. All memories don't necessarily have an emotional component, or they don't have a strong emotional component. So one of the questions I've been having recently, not necessarily in connection with our meetings here, but generally, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all human beings have this experience. It's this odd thing when memories just pop into your mind and you have no idea whatsoever why this happened. For example, 10 minutes ago, I had sudden instantaneous memory of the first girl I kissed. I have no idea why, not a clue. I was 13, 10 or 11 years old or whatever. And other strange things like an old pair of shoes or whatever. So this whole business of the rambling brain comes up to my mind. I mean, I'm assuming that everybody, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm a little bit of a nutcase. I mean, but I correct me if I'm wrong again, but I believe everybody has, I'm just making up this word, the rambling brain, this business of odd little tiny, and it can be little slivers of memory just popping up all the time, and you haven't got a clue what they're about. So I'm presuming that when you talk about memory links, you're not talking about those things. Or if you are, then please explain that a bit, because I see memories popping up in my mind at times. You got a little bit of an idle time. I mean, maybe it doesn't happen quite so much if you're sitting machining a tool, right? But if you got a bit of idle time, these odd little pieces of memory come popping up all over the place sometimes, and they're the strangest things, and you can't see the slightest emotional referral memory link. So if you could maybe comment a little bit on that for me, would help. And thank you.
Yeah, I see it all in memory links. I see it, or put it another way, I say memory links are a tool that can be applied to all those situations. And the word, as Vic knows, and Mary and Nikki, the word memory links is mine, okay? David called them referrals. And I think I can say, talking for Mary and Nikki and myself, I think all of us prefer his word in many ways. And between ourselves, we still use it often. That was another bit. I wasn't a millionaire. Okay, that's probably a paper I should write. I wasn't a millionaire, so I had to do this and this and this and this. I held onto the word referrals for probably some of the early decades, and people were so critical. No one uses the word that way, and in the helping professions, in social work, and anyone in a hospital, referral means this, which means referring someone to another agency. And I can't remember the particular incident, but I was, to be frank, I was just really pissed off. And I said, all right, it's called memory links. Now try and take this theory apart. Because, and this is getting to your point, and this is where his word was better than mine. When you are saying those things, whether it's emotional, social, or whether you can understand it, or whether it's just this little blip that comes up, something is happening today that is referring back to something in your life, always. More, Cynthia.
One of the and this is relevant because as an astrologer, one of the works that we do is sort of and at least I don't do therapy with it and stuff just because it's easier for me not to, but and I think I can do something. What I do is you look at, you can get a picture of somebody's whole life because you kind of like a master of time. And one of the techniques, it's a newer technique I've learned, and it really relates to referrals, whether you believe in astrology or not, is that you can see different parts of somebody's psyche or charts will become active on a cyclical basis. And I mean, and it's really, and this particular technique, it's called zodiacal releasing. But it's narrative based, and what you can see, like things like there's a way you could see where you have an idea at one point, but you don't do anything with it, and then later, like 10 years later, that idea will come to the surface. And then you'll do something with it, and you might, in fact, there's actually, and then actually, and this comes up, and these refer back to, and it's really weird because it does sort of work as a referral, because everything in one particular period, and they happen at momentary levels, I mean, like days, they happen weeks, they happen at like a monthly level, and then they happen at a decade levels, and the little ones will actually have the same theme as the big ones. It's the wildest thing, but that's sort of how, and it's funny because this technique was developed by ancient Greeks. But just this whole concept, and it's all based in terms of purpose, it's all based on what you desire in your heart and want to do matches with your fortune and your luck, what you have the ability to do in the world. And and I'm doing this in a philosophy, but it's just that whole kind of philosophical thing that your life isn't just like one linear thing. It goes in circles. And And you can see it whether or not you want to map it to a chart. You can see it in people's lives, and I and I did like, oh yeah. For example, like for a while, I mean, like now I've been talking about, I thought my lawyer days were long gone, and they are. I don't want to ever do that again. But I've been noticing how listening to things in here is like, oh yeah, this is what happened then. This is like when we're talking about like things in terms of life forces. I'm like, 90% of the problem when divorces were difficult and you were trying to get through it was getting people to operate in the right life force for the things that they needed to do. Usually the performance life force was usually a barrier to everything. But to be in your caring life force when it came to the children, for the most part, although, but in terms of finances and the money and making sure that your children have the basic needs met, that you need to do from the material. And people would mix them up. People would like be dealing with issues of their children for how it would affect their child support, and then they'd be like worrying about their stuff, because of emotional that there's sort of I mean, this would be a great application, and I could see that in a lot of areas of life. Like one of the things I'm seeing with my spouse and only, in her work and some of the things is they expect the social workers to be good at the material life force with documentation. I'm like, well, that's not what you hire them for. You hire them, get somebody who's good at the material life force for that, and that kind of thing. So I've kind of gone off a little bit, but
No,
that whole,
that's useful in what Vic said, and because the way I see it, and yeah, I just want to go off on a bit of a tangent. I feel if I'd sort of grown up with different interests, I would have been a really good talent scout for football players, okay, or basketball players. I could have gone around to all the high schools and I really could have picked, the kids who were going to go all the way, okay. Had I been I feel in my field of work, okay, I'm a good talent spotter, okay. I really believe that. It was just something I had. And there is not a day that goes by where I have any doubts about David Pallen's talent. That's why I put in the bit about talent scout. Now, I've been at it 50 years. You were talking, which we must share sometime. But at the moment, I'm obsessed with Sicily. And I'm really studying Sicily, and the ancient Greeks in Sicily are just fascinating, okay? So I just want to share that with you. But bringing it back to memory links, okay? I feel that his concept of referrals is literally magnificent, okay? It's simple, it's subtle, he puts it on a diagram with X's and noughts on a, a straight line with those X's and noughts on it. But it can be applied to so much. So coming in on Vic's point, because I had that quick response, but I feel what memory links are, they're more complex for each of us, more complex and more detailed. And this is sort of Cynthia, helping me find some graphics or something, in terms of computers, as a DNA, one of those DNA models, okay, where everything is endlessly complex, right? But if I understand it correctly, my DNA is mine. It matches me. Nobody else's. There's all these endless bits in it. And that's the way I feel memory links are. There's a whole lot of it that's we've forgotten. There's and some of it's gone, and a whole lot of it's gone. Like a whole lot of Greeks in Sicily is gone. Where'd they go? So the complexity of it and how it can be from, there are big memory links but go back not to all of human evolution. That's the short history that go back to memory links before we were human. I will protect my children. It's not just human beings who do that.
So, boy, there's sure a lot in here. What Cynthia and what Peter you just said is so rich. I just, at the risk of saying too much, I just have to respond to a couple of little things here. Cynthia really touched on something really, really important that really clicked with me, and I'll try to. I want to try and get this out. I think Cynthia said things are not just linear, but are cyclic. And I want to say definitely the cyclic nature of life is very important. B, I think Western civilization has been obsessed with and entrapped by the linear view to a significant degree. And a lot of people, their thinking mode is linear. And that can be a problem. Cynthia talked about, and this is just a note I made, an idea that could have been useful but wasn't, and it's only later on you suddenly realize that it could be in a different context. I'll give you a quick example. Many years ago, I had the privilege of working, I worked for somebody who was a really energetic sales kind of a person. And you can almost say aggressive. And I was a sort of the hyperactive, ethical, caring person. And I was doing this work for this person. And it grated against me. I can't do this, right? And I eventually parted company with this person. And that person went on to develop a $100 million business, which he then sold 10 or 20 years ago, and then developed a academy of rehabilitation for drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I thought, and now I'm connecting with that person again, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Now there's an example. First of all, this person started with, you could say, material life force. And there's a big, wonderful story with this person. I might send it off to you later on. But of course, I was this caring, super hyped up, ethical, caring person. And we didn't quite hit it off together. And now he's developed and I've developed, and years have gone by, and I'm looking at this and I'm, my gosh, that's incredible. So that part, this business of the cyclic is really important. To connect this also with my own faith-based thing, one of our church spiritual leaders once talked this business about why don't people get answers to prayer, and he said something so simple. And he said, and this was a very highly developed spiritual person with, and he said that, well, because we're just not ready for it. We're not quite ready for the answer that the Lord would give us, and that's kind of the same thing. We go through some developments, and then one day we're ready. We have the receptacles, whether it's our brain cells or our emotion cells, we have the receptacles, and then suddenly, and then the cycle comes again, and that's either that same person or the same opportunity, and then we're into it again. So a lot of the things that you both said really are touching me very, very deeply. The only little catch that I don't quite get, and I think Cynthia and Peter said this, what I tentatively don't agree with, and I don't know about this, you're saying, I thought you both said this, is that with regard to memory links or referrals, that if the memory comes up, it's because an emotion has sparked it, if that's my understanding. And what I was trying to say originally was these little strange little chunks, like I said a little while ago, I had this memory of the first girl I kissed, and other strange things, or certain color pair of shoes or whatever, right? And I'm thinking Well, I certainly don't see any emotional iCloud there at all. And so if there is one, it's subconscious. That then gets us back to psychoanalysis, which I'm a little bit scared of, because I think it's a little bit, you know, almost like magic. And I'm not unsure about that. When it comes to, and it's interesting to me, Peter, that you said you originally liked the word referral, and I really appreciate you telling us the story of why you changed it to memory links. I didn't know that little bit of history, and I can see how that could have happened. What I understood from David taking about referrals, that it very much was an emotional event. That's how I understood referrals when it was being taught in the unit, was that something has triggered an emotion, could be from the past, could be from a childhood experience, could be from a recent breakup or whatever. Oh, I don't want to do this, or I can't deal with this. And that's because of the emotion that comes out of the emotional iCloud. I can't quite successfully relate that to these little fleeting little images that come along if I'm walking along the street. I'm inclined to believe, and you correct me again if I'm wrong, I think that the science now basically says that probably we never forget anything, that it's all there, that things are imprinted on our brain cells. Does that necessarily mean that something has to bring it out, i.e. an emotional referral, or is it rather like there's an ocean that's turbulating within us all the time anyway? So I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but everything that the two of you just said is really, really rich. And it comes back to this business again, to come back to Cynthia, where using the tools in other contexts, whether it be business or sports or whatever, getting down, and again, back to what Peter said, it's not just technique. It's not just about technique. It's about the common sense understanding. This was David's genius. Somehow he took the common sense, simple things, and he made them talkable. And then, and as I said before, with a lot of theories and technique, you talk about it too much and it gets diluted. With Pelham's things, you could talk about it to the cows come home and it doesn't get diluted. That's really, really interesting to me. So I'm blabbering on a lot, but again, thank you to both of you, because you've just said things that are touching me deeply, and that's why I come here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think looking at that, because I know what you mean, and it's something I want to work on, because even here, anyway, what I want to do is be able to present how this material can help people now. David said, and something I have not followed, that what he developed is just relevant to where he's teaching it now. So there are certain sort of biases in the work, because he was teaching it to young people who could destroy their lives. Not simple. So, as you know, and this happened in Pelham for quite some time. You know, what we call performance life force had a sort of bad press, you know, because, you know, the young people who was teaching it to, you know, they could go there real easy, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I think in a similar way, in a similar way, there's something about referrals that he used it in the way you were talking about, okay? Okay, you've got this big reaction to this, it's a referral, so you've really got to look at it. But I guess, and I think it's true for any of us, you know, we develop our theoretical structure and then we have our practice, right? And they're not always the same. But Cynthia.
Oh, I didn't necessarily want to interrupt. I just wanted to get into the queue. But Should I go or should I wait for you?
Your sound's low. That thing
Oh,
with
okay.
that.
I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to get into the queue.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well, yeah, finish this because I believe his concept of referrals is stronger than anything else around. My guess is, I don't know, he was, as I've said here, transparency is a touchstone of what is called Pelham now. David was the least transparent person I've ever met, almost. So, but somehow or other, he learned about Freud, and then he did something very different with it. I think the point you're making, Vic, is really right, and it's something I struggle with after all this time. And it's almost, there is a distinction in our language. This is quite, this is technical, this is in the weeds, okay, between feelings and emotions, okay. So he put, in terms of the people he were working with, well, that's a referral, you've got to look at the referral, okay. But if you look at this, his intellectual structure, well, to use the word I'm using today, the theory he put in there, it's extraordinarily, I'll wax a bit passionate here. It's extraordinarily pure and logical and makes sense. And it's sort of different from his practice, okay? David's the only person, I might even include myself in this. David's the only person who developed a theory in my field of work within which he was not protected. You could attack him with his own theory. You could say you're too much into your performance life force. You could talk about his compulsive highs. He did not develop something within which he was protected. All the others did. They're very protected. Freud, Carl Rogers, Fritz Perls, all of them. Maybe me. But he wasn't. You could use his theory to take him up. You could use his theory to point out his faults to him. That to me is extraordinary. That I know I'm a little bit all over the place today, but to be quite frank, I'm using today a bit to prepare for what starts on Friday. So all the little things are referrals, okay? They're just different sorts of referrals. So there's referrals about politics or history or climate. He only said this very briefly. One of those, he made sort of categorical statements, okay? If you're going to get high, then your low will be 7 times as long as your high. He made these sort of categorical statements. I've lost my track, sorry, see if I can get it back. Oh yes, referrals. He said referrals start with food. They're the basic ones. Food.
Please say your statement again.
Yeah, he said referrals start with food. And he also said opinionation starts with food, if you remember opinionation on strata material. The way he sort of used it and the way it sort of developed, and as you said, it was, Vancouver at that time was sort of full of therapy, the way Vancouver now, if I'm correct, is full of gyms, okay? So it sort of went that way, okay? But I don't think that was, I don't think, how can I put it? I know how I can say, referrals aren't restricted to emotions, okay? And then there's some distinction about emotions and feelings that I think I could bore everyone with for hours and hours. I still struggle with it. So, you know, I have feelings about the type of day it is, or the food I'm eating, or my football team, or, you know, political parties, or the books on my shelves, you know. But it's not sort of emotional life. Yes, the concept of referrals is about our history, and that's the way it relates to our purpose, which I realize I've lost a little bit here today.
That helps me. Thank you.
Yeah. Cynthia.
I just wanted to get my place in the queue before things went in a different direction. But one of the things, it's interesting you said about food, but one of the things for me, having studied Japanese and also a few other languages, I started studying Swedish as well because my relatives from Sweden came and I had a real hard time justifying why I was studying Japanese when I didn't at least know Swedish. So so anyways, and my spouse also started learning a little, mostly so that we could, you know, read what they write on Facebook and we can talk to them when we came. But one of the things that has to do with memory links is, now she took Spanish in high school and she actually she can actually hold very difficult. Yeah, she can sort of hold on a conversation in Spanish. I mean, that's, you know, it's not great and it's rusty. But anyways, but she never learned any like Swedish or whatever. So anyways, we both were learning Swedish, and for me, Swedish was pretty easy. I mean, you know, even though I didn't really learn it, I mean, just like a few words here and there, but when I'm doing Swedish and she would say, "Gosh, Swedish is so hard." And what I realized is because I grew up hearing it, even though I never really learned the language, but the memory links were somehow there. Like there was something about how I heard things. And I've also noticed that, I mean, I had a harder time learning Japanese. I mean, I mean, I can't say I'm great, but I could probably carry on. I know I can carry on a conversation, at least with a non-native speaker. I don't know how I do with a native speaker, but, um, but I noticed it was very hard for me at first, but it was a lot easier for people who had listened to anime even with English subtitles, because not that they actually learn the language, but there's something. So I guess I'm trying to talk about, there's like even if it's unconscious, there's something mysterious and there's something about memory links that, you know, I don't claim to understand. I mean, astrology, it's all lunar, but lunar is a lot more than emotions. Actually, lunar is also associated with food, interestingly enough. But you know, there's something mysterious. I couldn't exactly say why Swedish was easy, except for pronunciation, but that's Swedish pronunciation is.
Yeah, I think
But there's
I
something
think
there.
he's steered away from this word. I guess I've replaced credo with just the ground rules, you know, that sort of ordinary flatness of it. But what you said is so important. We really can't understand memory links unless we embrace the mystery. But I think for David, and then for me in other ways, probably following him, you know, not going to go there, going to keep it really solid and ordinary and straight and practical. But, you know, maybe we've missed out on something there. But, you know, we are all alive. I mean, that's a fact, you know, the five of us are alive today. And that means we have a history that goes back forever, because we would not be alive unless there were all these other people and animals, and, you know, going back millennia. I mean, and I think in a sort of way, that's too much. We can't take that on. You know, it's just a bit too much. But it's a fact. I mean, we are alive, and we are alive because there's this chain of life And that, of course, brings up all the mysteries, all the necessary mysteries. And so yeah, we almost can't understand memory links unless we embrace that there's a whole lot of mystery there as well. Yeah, Vic.
Thank you. I'll just say goodbye in a moment. The other final comment I wish to make is that this, what you've touched on about David Pellin's concepts being so simple and talkable, and that they don't lose their primacy even though they're talkable. What's immensely significant about that to me right now is, and again, I don't want to, get overtly political. I don't want to do that. But as I've said before on here, the great challenge that's happening, particularly in America, is the destruction of the middle ground when people can't talk to each other. And in a sense, David's philosophy made it possible for people of wide, look at us right now. I mean, I'm definitely right of center, right? And so when we look at that, David's philosophy made it possible for people to talk to each other. That's immensely significant. In fact, it's much more significant now, and we can see it as significant now against the backdrop of what is happening because of the destruction of the middle, right? So that's all I want to say. I just want to thank you all very, very much. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to drop in. I'm going through a lot right now. I had a little brief chat with Mary before this came on. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be able to be a part of this, even though I can't come regularly. So thank you. And take care.
Okay, really good to see you, Vic.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Bye, Vic.
Bye. Looking ahead to Wednesday, see if we can come up with examples about the memory links behind our purpose, okay? But maybe we need to take that into first how we see the memory links behind other people's purpose. I've got to find a way to keep, to be absolutely frank, keep the forum becoming therapy groups, because it's not going to work, because as Vic just said, yeah, you must be able to come in and out. So I guess we've got to be a bit careful about it, because I set up, Wednesday would be examples. So that could take us into the biggest therapeutic issues, right? So I just need your help. How we're going to navigate those rapids, okay? And that's why I brought in the word theory. The forum is about theory, therefore the examples we come up on Wednesdays somehow are about theory. What do you think? Help me a bit with that, Nikki.
You're making sense in what you're saying, because I was just thinking, oh dear, I'm going to find that that difficult, just because every single thing in my life is about my memory links. So just trying to, can I accomplish this or that material task? Like, acres and acres of repetitive memory links are the reason why I can't. So I am the worst culprit, I'm afraid, and because I sort of don't talk or think about anything else, because everything has to, because I'm so driven to become capacitated from incapacitated, that kind of, if it's not about therapy, I don't think about it. But I'll try.
Mary, what's your reflections on that one? Because I think it's going to be big as we move ahead.
Well, I think it's kind of how we started out in the forums, reserving the therapy for virtual pen in Italy. So it's just like a reset, really.
Okay.
Having strayed away from what we originally intended. And when I was feeling better able to do the occasional Wednesday, I felt it kind of stayed more in the territory of the theory as applied to our lives.
Mm.
So I think that precedent is there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking the way David said that, because some of that model is his. He'd give a lecture on a Monday, and I'm sure it was a Thursday, there'd be a discussion. Now, hadn't anyone turned up for the discussion, people turned up for the lecture. But yeah, so just finishing up this session, you know, we want to establish safety. Our purpose is to establish safety, but at the same time, a learning opportunity. And we can do that with theory, you know, but the forum is not a therapy group. And I guess my memory links about that and my purpose about that is my purpose is to deliver something that's very, very safe. And my memory links about that are seeing irresponsible things done in my field of work because people were more concerned to look like they were the new genius therapist than they were to deliver a safe product.